I walked into the courthouse believing truth alone would protect my auntie. I told myself that facts had weight, that honesty carried authority, that the room would recognize the quiet strength she had carried for years. The doors closed behind us with a sound that felt final, and for a moment I thought the hardest part would be over once her story was heard. The air inside was cold, metallic, indifferent, like it had absorbed every broken promise that had ever echoed through these walls. When her name was called, it didn't sound like a person's name. It sounded like a case file, a number, something to be processed and moved aside. Across the room, opposing counsel leaned back in their chair, lips curling into a smirk they didn't bother to hide. I heard a low joke pass between them, breathy, casual, as if this were entertainment. As if my auntie's life had been reduced to a punchline they could enjoy before lunch. When she stood, the way she was addressed made my chest tighten. Not with respect, not even with patience. She was spoken to like a burden, an inconvenience clogging the schedule. Every word aimed at her carried the message, "Hurry up, don't matter too much, don't take space." Her voice trembled when she began, not because she was lying, because telling the truth after being silenced for years feels like stepping onto ice that might crack. She barely finished her first sentence before she was cut off. "Stick to the point," they said. "Answer the question." As if her pain needed editing to be acceptable. A faint ripple of laughter moved through the gallery when her past was mentioned. It wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was enough to let her know they were judging her history, not listening to it. I felt heat rush to my face, a mix of anger and disbelief, while she stared straight ahead, pretending not to hear. The judge's face remained neutral, unreadable. But in that stillness, I felt something worse than anger. Permission. The kind that tells bullies they can continue. The kind that says cruelty is allowed as long as it's polite. When evidence was presented, it was dismissed with a phrase that made my stomach drop. Emotional exaggeration. Just 2 words, spoken calmly, that erased years of sacrifice, loss, and survival. I watched papers fall back onto the table like they weighed nothing at all. My auntie sank slightly into her chair, her shoulders folded inward, the way they used to when she thought no one was watching. I had seen that posture before, at family gatherings, at work events, in moments when she chose silence over conflict. Seeing it here, under fluorescent lights and public judgment, felt unbearable. My jaw tightened as realization set in. This wasn't misunderstanding, this was strategy. They had decided she was small before she ever opened her mouth. They had underestimated her on purpose. The humiliation wasn't loud. It didn't shout or slam doors. It was surgical, precise. Each cut small enough to deny, but deep enough to wound. And with every passing second, I felt something inside me change. In that moment, something irreversible ignited. Not rage without direction, but clarity. A cold, focused resolve. I understood then that this room wasn't built to protect people like my auntie unless someone forced it to listen. And as I watched her sit there, underestimated and dismissed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not where her story would end. I rewind to the years my auntie raised me when no one else stayed. When adults disappeared quietly, she remained without announcing her sacrifice. I see it clearly now. Early mornings before the sun, late nights after exhaustion had already won. She never complained. She just adjusted her life around mine and kept going. She worked double shifts until her hands cracked, skin split open from cleaning chemicals and cold water. I remember the way she wrapped them in paper towels instead of bandages. Pride intact even when pain was obvious. She came home smelling like work, shoulders heavy, but her back never bent in defeat. She taught me dignity without ever saying the word. It was in how she paid every bill on time, even when it meant skipping dinner. It was in how she spoke softly, but never begged. I learned self-respect by watching her choose integrity when shortcuts were tempting. Then her marriage collapsed, not in one loud moment, but like a slow public execution. Arguments whispered at first, then shared openly, then dissected by people who enjoyed watching her fall. Each phase stripped something from her: confidence, safety, belonging. Family members took sides quickly. None of them chose hers. I watched invitations disappear, conversations stop when she entered rooms. She became the problem simply for surviving something they preferred to ignore. So, she learned to survive by staying quiet, observant, composed, careful with every word. Silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. I saw how she studied people instead of trusting them, how she listened more than she spoke, how she learned to endure without asking for mercy. Over time, silence became her armor, not her weakness. It protected her from further harm, from giving people ammunition they didn't deserve. She learned to carry everything alone because experience taught her help came with conditions. Then the betrayal resurfaced, the one she never spoke about openly. Someone she trusted with her finances. Someone who smiled while draining her stability piece by piece. I remembered her signing papers late at night, glasses slipping down her nose, trusting explanations she didn't fully understand. Legal documents were placed in front of her and signed in blind faith. She believed loyalty existed where it never had. Those signatures followed her for years, binding her to consequences she didn't create. Standing in that courtroom now, it hit me with brutal clarity. This case wasn't sudden. It wasn't isolated. It was the final stage of a long exploitation that began the moment people realized how much she was willing to endure without fighting back. Her past trauma bled invisibly into the room. Every hesitation, every pause, every shaky breath carried years of unspoken damage. The court only saw a hesitant woman. I saw a survivor carrying the weight of history. And finally, I understood why she never asked me for help. It wasn't pride alone. It was conditioning. Years of being dismissed taught her that needing support only made things worse. That realization didn't soften my anger. It sharpened it, because now I knew exactly what had been taken from her, and exactly what still needed to be reclaimed. The opposing lawyer twists facts with confident ease, rearranging reality like it belongs to them. Every sentence sounds polished, rehearsed, delivered with the calm arrogance of someone who assumes the room is already on their side. Truth bends under their tone, not because it's weak, but because power knows how to sound convincing. Across the aisle, my auntie's former partner plays the victim flawlessly. Shoulders slumped just enough, voice carefully strained. They speak about stress and misunderstandings, as if years of damage were simple accidents. Watching them perform regret without accountability makes my stomach turn. Each objection against my auntie's testimony lands like a slap. Not loud, not dramatic, just sharp interruptions that cut her off mid-thought, mid-memory. Every time she tries to explain, she's stopped, redirected, reduced. I see her flinch even when no one raises their voice. As files are shuffled, I notice something wrong. Key documents, ones I reviewed the night before, are missing from the stack. Pages that prove timelines, records that explain everything. Gone, just like that. My pulse spikes. My hands clench as the realization settles in. This isn't chaos, it's deliberate manipulation. Someone decided what the court would and wouldn't see long before we walked in. The system isn't confused, it's controlled. The judge looks at my auntie and warns her to stick to relevant facts. The words sound neutral, but the message is clear. Stop talking about how it felt. Stop explaining context. Stop being human. Reduce your pain into something easier to dismiss. Her breathing becomes shallow. I can see memories crashing into her all at once. Moments she buried to survive, now dragged into the light without protection. Her hands tremble slightly on the table. She swallows hard, trying to stay present while the past presses in. I stand and request a brief recess. Just a moment, just enough time for her to breathe. The request is denied without eye contact. No explanation, no acknowledgement, just a quiet refusal that feels louder than shouting. The gallery's whispers grow louder, crueler. I catch fragments, judgments, assumptions, disbelief, the kind of murmurs that remind you exactly how alone you are when power decides you don't deserve sympathy. In that noise, I feel the weight of generations who were never believed, women who spoke carefully and were still called dramatic, survivors who documented everything and were still doubted. The room feels heavy with history repeating itself. This is no longer just her case. It's a pattern being replayed in real time. Different faces, same outcome, unless someone breaks it. I sit back down, jaw tight, heart steadying into something dangerous. I make a promise silently, not to the room, but to her. This will not end the way they expect. My phone vibrates against my palm, a number lighting up the screen that I almost don't recognize. For a split second, I consider ignoring it. The courtroom feels too tight, too exposed for interruptions, but something in my chest tightens, and I answer. A former clerk from the same law firm is on the line. Their voice is low, rushed, trembling like they're afraid the walls might be listening. "I don't have much time," they say. "You need to know those filings weren't mistakes." They speak quickly, nervously, words tumbling over each other as they explain falsified records, altered dates, documents quietly replaced after submission. I lean slightly away from the table, heart pounding, as if the truth itself has weight. Then my phone starts buzzing nonstop. Screenshots, email chains, timestamps, file histories. My inbox floods with proof. Clean, undeniable, precise. Every missing document suddenly has a shadow trail. Every lie leaves fingerprints. In that instant, it becomes clear. The case was rigged before it even began. Not mishandled, not misunderstood, designed. My stomach twists, but beneath the anger, something steadier takes shape. The power dynamic shifts inside my chest. The helplessness drains away, replaced by control, calm, purpose. I'm no longer reacting, I'm preparing. I stand and request permission to submit new evidence mid-hearing. My voice doesn't shake, it doesn't need to. The room goes quiet in a way it hasn't all day. The judge hesitates, just for a second, but it's enough. I can see it. The subtle recognition that something has changed, that this isn't proceeding according to script anymore. Across the aisle, the opposing counsel's confidence cracks for the first time. Their posture stiffens, their pen pauses midair. They glance toward the bench, then back at me, searching for footing they no longer have. I turn slightly and lock eyes with my auntie. No words, just a single nod, a promise. Her shoulders lift just a fraction, like she feels it too, the shift, the opening, the possibility. This is the moment silence stops protecting anyone. The shield she carried for years falls away, not because she's weak, but because she no longer has to hide. So, truth steps forward, uninvited but unstoppable, and finally demands to be heard. The new evidence hits the screen and the room changes instantly. Forged signatures line up beside originals, the differences unmistakable. Hidden accounts surface one by one, their balances glowing cold and precise. What was dismissed as confusion now stands exposed as design. Gasps ripple through the courtroom as the numbers appear. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just raw shock. People lean forward without realizing it, eyes tracking totals that tell a story no voice could soften. The judge's tone hardens. The neutrality drains away, replaced by something sharper, more focused. Questions come faster now, edged with scrutiny. Authority is no longer passive, it's engaged. The opposing lawyer stumbles. Their words tangle as they scramble for explanations that don't land. Sentences trail off, objections die before they're finished. Confidence collapses under the weight of proof. My auntie's former partner turns pale, sweat beads at the collar, darkening fabric that was crisp moments ago. Their hands fidget, eyes darting toward exits that don't exist. The performance cracks and fear shows through. Financial records scroll past, transfer after transfer, dates lining up with moments my auntie struggled to pay bills. Years of calculated theft laid bare in clean rows and totals. There's no misunderstanding left to hide behind. A fraud investigator is called in immediately. The words carry finality. Procedure shifts gears. This is no longer a civil dispute quietly brushed aside. It's an exposure. The gallery's whispers dissolve into stunned silence. No commentary, no judgment, just the quiet recognition that something irreversible is happening. My auntie is asked to retake the stand, this time uninterrupted. She stands straighter. When she speaks, her voice steadies, grounded by truth that no longer needs defense. She tells everything fully, clearly, without rushing or apology. The judge issues a ruling that shifts the balance completely. Each sentence lands with purpose, correcting what was dismissed, restoring what was denied. Power moves back where it belongs. Justice doesn't arrive with applause or spectacle. It arrives quietly, firmly, undeniably, written into the record where no one can erase it again. We exit the courthouse into sunlight that feels earned, not gifted. It hits my face differently than it did this morning. Warmer, honest, like the world is acknowledging what just happened inside those walls. The doors close behind us, and for the first time, the weight lifts. My auntie exhales deeply, like she's been holding her breath for decades. The sound isn't dramatic, but it carries years of restraint, of swallowing pain to survive. Her shoulders drop, and I realize how long she's been bracing for impact that never should have come. Charges are formally filed against the man who exploited her. The words echo in my head. Filed, documented, official. Not whispered, not ignored. His actions finally have a name that the system recognizes. Assets are frozen. Restitution is ordered. Numbers move back where they belong, reversing damage that took years to inflict. It's not just money, it's acknowledgement that something was taken and must be returned. Family members who once doubted her suddenly reach out. Messages arrive filled with concern and excuses. She reads them quietly, without bitterness, then sets the phone down. She refuses reconciliation without accountability. No forced forgiveness, no rewriting history for comfort. Her boundaries are clear now, firm in a way they never were before. I watch her posture change as we walk. She's no longer folded inward, no longer shrinking to fit into spaces that underestimated her. She stands grounded, balanced, aware of her worth. What began as a legal victory turns into something deeper, an emotional reclamation. The courtroom didn't just restore facts, it returned pieces of her that were taken in silence. She turns to me and thanks me quietly. No speech, no tears, just steady eyes and a look filled with pride, not just in me, but in herself. In that moment, I understand something clearly. Revenge wasn't destruction. It wasn't chaos or cruelty. It was correction. It was balance restored. The system didn't break her this time. It bent toward the truth because someone refused to let it look away. She walks forward with her name restored, not as a survivor defined by damage, but as a woman who reclaimed what was always hers. I'm speaking directly to anyone who's ever been dismissed the way she was, to anyone who stood in a room and felt smaller because someone decided you were easier to ignore than to understand. I see you because I watched it happen to her. I have learned that underestimation is rarely accidental. It's often strategic. People decide your value before you speak, then build their behavior around that assumption. They rely on your silence. They count on your patience. They mistake endurance for permission. Silence can protect, but only until truth is ready. My auntie stayed quiet for years, not because she was weak, but because she was surviving. Silence kept her standing long enough for the moment when it no longer served her to hide. Power shifts when preparation meets the right moment. Not when you shout, not when you rush, but when you're ready and the truth arrives with receipts no one can dismiss. Remember this: dignity doesn't require permission. You don't need approval to stand upright. You don't need validation to be right. Your worth isn't decided by the loudest voice in the room. Justice may delay, but documentation remembers everything. Every signature, every transfer, every lie leaves a trail. Time doesn't erase truth, it sharpens it. My auntie's story didn't end as a tragedy. It became a warning, a reminder that quiet people are often watching, learning, and preparing while others celebrate too early. I want you to question narratives handed to you easily, especially the ones that paint survivors as inconvenient or emotional. Ask who benefits from that version of the story. If you've ever been underestimated, share your story, not for sympathy, but for clarity, because every truth spoken makes the next one harder to silence. This wasn't just her victory, it was a lesson, one written in patience, proof, and resolve. Thank you to the witnesses, not the spectators. And if you're here for stories rooted in truth, not noise, subscribe, not for drama, but for justice.